folks, welcome to the channel Thinking Theology. I may be changing the name of the channel soon because some folks get the impression that I defend or establish theology. I don't. I just talk about it from a philosophical perspective, but anything that sort of touches on it. Atheistic thought, agnostic thought. I'm agnostic, but I love getting into like the science. I like seeing like the different strains of argument and argumentation, how well they're constructed, how people stand in them, all those things. But anyhow, this one just came across my feed, and the topic of it got me going. And it's basically political Christianity versus biblical Christianity. It's kind of it in a nutshell. I watched the video here. Her name is Alisa. I think that's how you would say it, not Alyssa, but it might be Alyssa. So Alyssa or Alisa, should you see this, please forgive me if I've mispronounced your first name, but Alisa Childers, and she's got thoughts on this. And I may have done a reaction to something of hers before, and I just like how she stands in her opinions, even those that I don't agree with, because we do diverge on thought. But I like nice people. I like people who are thoughtful. I like people who support what they believe with good reasons versus like pure emotional torrents and such, just to sort of bowl you over as though what they're saying is self-evidently true. Nothing anyone says is self-evidently true, because once you get into epistemological concerns, issues, and nuances and such, you realize that knowledge is a funny, elusive concept. And one of the some people will say in the comments, like, why do you ever talk about God? And it's like, well, one, take a look at the channel name right now. And secondly, because there are some people, even atheists, who came from a hardcore Christian background or just a normal religious upbringing and accepted it, and then at some time found that the evidence wasn't convincing any longer, whatever their evidence was or is for having left the fold. And this can just be confirmatory for them as to why they left. You know, folks just like to explore things. So if we can get over the I'm right, you're wrong, and just say, you know what, I've got my beliefs. Even if I think someone else's beliefs are idiotic, it doesn't mean I have to think that the person is less than human. So we at least have that in common. So I'm going to be taking a look at this, and I just want to define our terms. A simple distinction between morals and ethics. And you can always go down these rabbit trails and nuance the crap out of things, but morals are basically subjective. They're what we hold valuable to ourselves. They tend to be ideological. They can come from a religious upbringing. They don't necessarily have to, but it's what we believe and in a sense project out and think the way society should behave. Ethics kind of conduct in the opposite direction. Ethics are more about society's expectations of one another and how we think individuals should behave. So you, for example, might think working 20 hours a week is an incredible work ethic. But if you're within a culture or a society where 40 to 60 hours a week, or if you work at Goldman Sachs or JP Morgan or one of the investment firms and you're expected to work 90 to 100 hours a week, your work ethic by those standards, by that culture standards, is terrible. It's abhorrent. So morals really are from the inside out. Ethics, in a nutshell, are almost from the outside in. That's sort of like where the intersection comes in, like of abortion, where somebody might find abortion absolutely abhorrent. They may consider it to be murder. I'm just using this as an example. I don't say I believe these things, or I don't say I don't. But for argument's sake, somebody might hold their morals would be that abortion is absolutely wrong. Now, if the culture in which they live says it's not wrong, it's okay, you're allowed to get an abortion, you've got a disconnect there. And that's sort of where some of the friction comes even within Christianity itself or within different religions where it comes in. Because if a society says, it's okay, we're not going to hold it against you if you get an abortion, but somebody thinks you're murdering people, there's going to be friction between the broader culture and those individuals. But anyway, we're going to get into seeing her, Alisa Childers, the country artist Tyler Childers. That's how I'm saying Childers instead of Childers. All right. The Triangle of Theology, Politics, and Ethics, and how to spot progressive Christianity. That's what she has titled this on her channel. And she has a very nice following.
Let's get back to this progressive Christian triangle. So if you see the 3 points of the triangle, progressive Christianity can be characterized by theology, ethics, and politics. So if you think of it kind of like a triangle, there's 3 prongs that sort of make up what progressive Christianity is. I just talked with you about the theological angle of it, but there's also a political angle. In fact, I've shared this before on the podcast. There was some sociological research that was released a few years ago about the mindset of conservative Christians and progressive Christians when it comes to all sorts of things, but politics was one of those things. And one of the things that this study found was that progressive Christians tend to start with their political views, and then their theological views will flow out of that. So, for example, you're not going to find, maybe I'm wrong, but I have never come across a progressive Christian who also was like a conservative in politics. I feel like I can't even recall finding that. So again, I'm not saying it's not out there. I've never run into.
I think she's already defined them as contrary, like progressive versus conservative. So once you have that, by definition, I think a progressive would not vote on the right.
To it. Progressive Christians tend to be very, very vocal politically, and they tend to be very, very much on the left. And what this sociological research showed was that they start with their political beliefs, and then they're going to derive their theological beliefs out of their politics. So whatever assumptions they might be making when it comes to maybe justice issues or things like that, they're going to morph their theology to fit that. So that's kind of the political point of the triangle. And then the third point of the triangle would be ethics. I don't know of any progressive Christian who is not strongly advocating for a change in the church's mind when it comes to biblical sexuality, marriage, and gender. So this is a pillar of progressive Christianity, is the ethics. And also, those ethics are going to flow along the lines of culture when it comes to things like adopting social justice ideologies and critical race theory. All of those 3 prongs are going to come together to sort of form the triangle that is progressive Christianity. So how to spot it will be, so theologically, you're going to be looking for people who are going to maybe be downgrading the Bible. The Bible, of course, is a book that contains a human element. When we talk about the doctrine of inspiration, we talk about how God inspired these writers, and he breathed his word out through them. So we see their personalities, we see their grammar styles, we see things like that reflected in the text, but it's the word on the page, the words on the page that are the word of God. Whereas in progressive Christianity, you can be.
All right, that's right. And I've done a few videos on this and written about this as well, that she and I diverge on that the notion of inspiration and what it constitutes and how people who wrote the various texts wrote, and the dictation theory versus what we would consider inspiration. Inspiration is when we want to do or say something from within. I may not be in the greatest of shape, but I could see a neighbor running regularly and very disciplined, and I get inspired to see that. So it's my observation and what that means to me, but it emanates from within. I'm like, I may need to get running, and look at how she gets up at 6 a.m. before work and runs, or he does this or that. So we get inspired when we see excellence in others or something in someone else that moves us from within. Maybe there's something that we want, but we don't know how to achieve it. But then we see somebody else working on it or having achieved it, and we say, all right, I just got to get started on that. That inspires me. I think that's the way the texts were written. And in fact, if you look at the opening of Luke, that's exactly how Luke said, "Oh, excellent Theophilus." Other people gave their accounts of things that have happened. I wanted to give you an orderly account of what I saw happening. That's inspiration to me, is where it is. But that is not dictation. Dictation is where your personality is not part of it. Those two are divergent, where your boss calls you into the office and says, take down a letter, I want you to write it to so-and-so, so send it to their lawyers or whatever. And you just dutifully write down what that person says. Your personality is irrelevant. You just are a scribe at that, just writing something down. And that's where you get into the notion of biblical inerrancy and this and such. And she's going to touch on that a little bit. But I will say one other thing, too, is that I do know people and have known in my life people who believed that the Bible's the Word of God, and they were hardcore liberals. That's how they applied it. So I'm in Jersey, so there's very liberal folks in New York City and such. And some of my dearest friends they're absolutely beautiful people. I trust them with my life. They either believe or used to believe, for example, that the Bible was the Word of God. They lived it in very strict ways, but they thought that Jesus would have voted Democrat. In any case, beautiful, loving, accepting people.
Looking for them to elevate the human element and devalue or demote the divine element. So there are not many progressive Christians that I know of that are going to be talking about the scriptures in their entirety from Genesis to Revelation as the fully inspired, fully authoritative, fully inerrant Word of God that's internally consistent, telling the same story from Genesis to Revelation. So they're going to be kind of picking the Bible apart, pitting bits of it against other bits, and downgrading the divine element, elevating the human element. So that's some of the theological things you might be looking for. There's going to be a strong social justice bent on the political angle. I will say that Christians should be political. I think we should. I think we should be involved in politics. We have the amazing opportunity in this country to have a vote to where we can go vote against the greatest evils, which there are a lot of them right now. But progressive Christians and more conservative Christians are going to define those things differently. So whereas I think personally that abortion is one of the greatest human rights holocausts in the history of the world, progressive Christians are going to think that to deny a woman the right to get an abortion is actually harming her and oppressing her. So when this sociological research came out and found that actually conservative Christians start with their theology and then their politics flow out of that, what that tells me is that I'm starting with my theology of thou shalt not commit murder, right? Thou shalt not murder. It's one of the 10 commandments. It's kind of a no-brainer. And so my politics is going to flow out of that. Whereas for the progressive Christian, I don't know, maybe they're starting with the idea that it is oppressive to women, and so they're going to be pro-abortion. And then, but that's part of the ethic angle as well, which often overlaps with politics. So you're going to see a lot of advocacy for LGBTQ inclusion in the church. There's going to be left-leaning politics, and there's going to be a theology that's going to deny major crucial points of the gospel along the way.
Yeah, there's a lot there. There's so much I could probably do 10 or 12 hours on the various topics that you just spoke of. It does show that there's no monolithic group, for those in the atheistic community who maybe grew up atheist and never were part of a religion in any way. Most people were at some point in some way. They might have been brought up Catholic or Protestant, Methodist, Lutheran, whatever, Jewish, whatever, and then over time, maybe when they went to college and then beyond, they didn't see the value in it or the consistency within it or whatever caused them to change their mind. And they had reasons for it. Many folks do. And for those folks, there are reasons, but there's no monolithic group in any sphere. And here she was discussing progressive versus what I would say biblical or conservative Christianity, where those who believe that the Bible is perfect, she said that it's inerrant, that it's consistent from Genesis through Revelation, which it is not. There are absolutely divergencies, and I don't just mean where a scribe mistranslated something or what have you. There are some forgeries in it and so forth, and I don't even rely on that for my view. I used to believe that the Bible was the Word of God, that God told people what to write, and they dutifully wrote it down in their various generations. And, from Paul, the first writer, chronologically, if you will, biblically, because he wrote about 20 years after Christ's death. And then when you get into the Gospels, the Gospel of John was written something like 90 years later. And so that is an enormous chunk of time for stories to get handed down and morph into other things. Now, if you believe that God dictated this to them, just like Joseph Smith, basically, with the Mormon Church, believes the tablets were written and his, on gold and all that, but you still have to assess what the texts say. I mean, when you look at Ezekiel, and I think it's Ezekiel 12, where it says, no man can atone for the sin of another. Every person is, in other words, every person's responsible for atoning before God for their own sins. Well, the New Testament notion, Romans 10:9, and that Jesus was the atonement for others and that it was a human sacrifice, which is forbidden in the Hebrew Bible, then you realize that there are divergencies and some very serious ones. And whether, enough arguments could be made for somebody that could sort of meld those different views together between the Hebrew Bible and the New Testament, fair enough. I don't disparage anybody for doing that. I was there at one point, but it was my in-depth research and rewriting of the New Testament and seeing the disparities. And it took a year and a half to rewrite the New Testament in my own words, working off of 6 fairly radically different English translations. So this paraphrastic version showed me that there is, I had a lot to account for in some of my foundational beliefs. The primary one that was assaulted by this study, and it hurt me, was that the Bible was the Word of God. That is not what the writers said. They frequently said, Paul included, that I'm giving you my word. I'm giving you my opinion. Sometimes it's explicitly stated, not the Lord. So I had to account for that. But in the context of what Alisa is saying, that if you believe that the Bible is the perfect, infallible Word of God, and that you're responsible for living it yourself and even sharing it with others and hoping others and almost insisting others, even in the political realm, adopt that way, that say we must outlaw abortion. Okay. There are arguments on both sides. There's nothing specifically in the Bible about abortion, and I'm not going to make this about abortion. I'm just saying as a matter of one's belief, I personally don't think abortion is a good way to go about doing things, but not for the reasons that those within the church do. I think that at some point our actions need to have consequences, and that's not a bad thing. I don't mean that in a harsh way or a heartless way. I mean, if we plug in the consequences to doing a given thing, like if I'm going to punch the wall, I don't want my hand to hurt, but I'm going to punch the wall, then I learn, well, don't punch the wall. Just learn to control the impulse to even punch the wall. And then I learned to walk it back and dial it back. And lo and behold, I've got control over my temper or whatever's bothering me in the moment and how I handle situations. Well, with abortion, for example, take the precautions not to get pregnant, or which would obviously be not having sex, but that's a very challenging thing for many folks because we are sexually oriented people. The difference, I do like the way she depicted, though, or explained, our paradigms. The things that we value the most is the lens through which we're going to view the world. My thing is compassion. And so I view the world through a compassionate lens. I have enormous compassion for others, but that's a double-edged sword. Not everybody can be overly compassionate. You've got to have police officers who are willing to arrest bad people. You've got to have judges who are willing to put people in prison. Not everybody can exude compassion. I don't know if I'd be able to write a ticket if I was a cop. So knowing my own personality types and proclivities and the lens through which I view things in the world is going to dictate really how well my relationships go with a lover, with colleagues, a line of work. If I'm expected to do things like deny health claims to people nonstop throughout the day, working for, say, a health insurer, that's going to be very difficult for me because that's not how I'm made. I view the world through a certain lens, but I also have a problem with people who are not compassionate, even though I know everybody cannot be, in a sense, like me. And I don't mean that I'm up here. I mean, I process the world my way. I cannot expect them to process the world this way. We need the divergent personalities in order to make it work. It's the way in which we stand on our personalities that makes it challenging, or whether we're accepting or not accepting of others. the way she presents her ideas, I love the way she presents her ideas. Whether I agree with them or not is irrelevant. The way she stands in her thoughts and opinions based on what I see on camera would be, she'd be a lovely person to have as a neighbor. Now, when you can talk with people about different ideas, that's what I like, being more of a philosopher and curious. I don't think I have all the right answers. I don't think anybody does. Arrogance is when you think you've got the answers and you're intolerant of hearing other people's ideas. So the morals versus ethics component, what I value versus what society values, at least for now, may diverge. It usually does in some area. And can I get along with others within my community, for example, who have different views than me? I can. I don't have a problem with it. When somebody's pompous because they think that their science or their religion is superior and they look down their nose at other people's views or at me, I have a problem with that. But otherwise, I don't have to agree with anybody. It doesn't have to be politically, religiously, atheistically, and they don't have to agree with me. And we can still have fun together going to the ball game, assuming we root for the same team. So anyway, all right, guys, leave your comments on that. I know some of you will have them. Have a great day. Alisa, thank you again. I'll see you on another video. Keep thinking theology. Hey, folks, if you want to take the personality test that I created for my life coaching practice, which is based on the book that I wrote, put your phone up, turn it on camera, and focus on this, and it'll take you to it. And it'll take you about 20 minutes to complete the test. It's free, and you'll get some information on your personality. It's quite detailed, quite revealing. It's kind of fun as well. And I'll be leaving this QR code up on the wall behind me for my regular videos. So I hope you take it, and I hope you enjoy it.